Good morning and welcome. My name is Ward Howell, and this is Adam Anderson. We're with Q2. We're an online banking, mobile payments, and security solutions provider based in Austin, Texas. We've been around since 2004 and processed for over 275 community banks and credit unions. I noticed in looking at the Finovate attendee list that we have a large percentage of financial institutions. By a show of hands, and I'm going to cover my eyes on my big head, how many of the financial institutions out here right now are concerned about fraud or have had fraud issues from an online perspective? All right, y'all, get on us because we know it's more than that. So at Q2, we know that fraud is an issue. We also know that most community banks and credit unions really aren't staffed to handle fraud. And of those same banks and credit unions, you don't have to raise your hand, but we're aware that you all are not staffed to monitor every ACH, domestic wire, and then large money transfer. And for that reason, we've come up with our own risk and fraud analytics solution aimed at community banks and credit unions. We know that with the FFIC guidance in 2005, online banking fraud is big, and it's getting bigger every year. In a recent study by NICE Actimize, it was estimated that between $100,000 and $200,000 on average every day is lost by small and medium-sized businesses to ACH and wire fraud. To us, that dollar amount actually seems a little bit low from our experience in talking with our customers and our prospects. You're probably wondering how this happens and what we can do to curb this. It's actually fairly straightforward, the reasons why this is happening. People by their very nature are very trusting, and as a result, a user's machine can be compromised in many different ways. That's why we address the behavioral and transactional nature of the problem at its source. The most common and expensive fraud that we're encountering today is corporate account takeover. In this scenario, a fraudster gains a user's user ID, password, and very often their challenge questions. At Q2, we recognize that the vast majority of financial institutions, particularly in the community bank and credit union market, have been challenged in implementing and maintaining standalone fraud risk mitigation systems. As an innovator, we've developed a real-time risk and fraud solution to give our customers multiple layers and options to combat fraud. Now, I'd like to show you how the Q2 risk and fraud analytics solution can help stop fraud in its tracks in real time.
Okay, Ward, why don't you go ahead and put your bad guy hat on because it's time to try and steal some money. So Ward, our bad guy, everybody see that, right? He doesn't look any goofier than he did a minute ago. So
you don't think the hat enhances it?
No, not in the least.
Brilliant.
So Ward, our bad guy, has taken over an account, and what you're looking at today is a wire transfer that he's going to try and make to a bank of his choosing for a relatively large amount. In real time, as Ward executes this payment now, our system is going to evaluate the payment, looking at both the login as well as the transactional characteristics of the payment that Ward tries to initiate to determine whether or not it is typical or atypical, and then stop it if it's an atypical payment. Go ahead. So one of the reasons that the real-time nature of this mechanism is so critical is that it provides end users who are trying to make valid payments immediate feedback that the payment's been stopped by the behavioral learning model, and it allows us to stop and intercept the bad guys more or less immediately before the payments have been scheduled or possibly even sent, which obviously reduces the capability for losses. Ward, if you'll jump over now and put on your good guy hat, which of course has a Q2 logo on it.
I'm really reluctant to get rid of that. And by the way, we will be selling these in the lobby afterwards when we're doing demos.
What we'll look at now is the CSR management tool that we provide end users in our multi-platform product that will allow them to look at the set of suspect transactions on a day-to-day basis and identify those transactions that need to be evaluated, maybe call a customer back or go through whatever process the bank sets up. One of the key elements here to note is not only are we stopping transactions in multiple channels, both in the online and mobile channel in these examples, but we're also identifying these transactions in such a way that the CSRs can focus in on what they are in a way that's integrated with their normal workflows. We did not want to give them an additional set of workload on top of everything they already have to do today to run the bank. If you'll drill into the detail then on the transaction you just created, Ward, we can talk a little bit about what we do to look at the transactions when we use our behavioral learning and machine learning models to identify potentially fraudulent transactions. And so one of the key things you'll see right up here at the top is that we have a number of graphs on this report that will demonstrate to us what it is about the transaction that was typical or atypical. So scrolling down through those, the first thing you'll see at the top is that the amount is highly atypical for this user. The next thing you'll see is that the target account was a savings account instead of a checking account. Next, and for payments that are wire-based, probably the most important, the beneficiary state was completely distinct from the normal probability mass of beneficiary states. So in the Bayesian and Markov chain learning models that we've been able to use to drive very high accuracy and identification of end-user behavior, we train on a user-by-user basis and then periodically retrain with new behavior as user behavior changes over time. And so these elements, which include the things we've already shown you, as well as target Fed district, the amount of time that elapses between the payments drafting and approval, and a number of other characteristics, we can really hone in on what is typical or atypical behavior, intercept the payment before it has a chance to reach its fulfillment mechanism, and help keep everybody's money safe.
Okay. Sorry. So we've walked you through our risk and fraud analytics solution. Our solution proactively stops fraud really in its tracks at the front end. We created this because we didn't see tools out there for community banks and credit unions that weren't native. We needed solutions that were cost effective, easy to implement, and could be out in the market fairly, very quickly. We've had this solution in production in a handful of banks and credit unions now, including a major institution on the West Coast, and we're continuing to move and to evolve the product further. We believe that one of the things that differentiates us is that we meet the fraud where it actually occurs, which is at the end users and their computers. We recognize that our financial institutions don't want to own those. What we want to do and create as many solutions and layers to stop the fraud before it occurs.
So thanks very much for your time today. We'd love to talk to you after the session. In closing, I just want to say Q2 is software people who believe very earnestly and very passionately about driving software to help our community financial institutions help communities here in the United States. It's time to stop the account fraud and start hitting back. Thank you.
Thank you.